afternoon. I'm Paula Steurer, founder of Sterling Public Relations here in Orange County. Grateful today to be here on this podcast show with my dear friend Ed Hart. And we're closing in on celebrating our 17-year anniversary. So excited to share my lessons learned and things that have been along the way in my journey.
Paula, it's great to see you. I'm so glad from sitting at a coffee shop at Pelican Hill to now here we are finally doing this. It's great to finally connect with you. So 17 years. Tell me, when you started this 17 years ago, did you have a pretty good idea, no idea at all? What were you thinking that 17 years from now you'd still be doing this?
No, if the girl back then knew that I would still be doing this and how much the company had grown today, she'd be shocked. So I get this question all the time. Did you go to school for PR? Was this always your goal? The answer is no. I went to school for merchandise marketing. I went to school at FIDM in San Diego, graduated in '03, and spent some time in the marketing and PR space, but quickly decided that I wanted to start my own company. So I had the brilliant idea in January of 2008, which you would remember is the middle of the Great Recession, when nobody was leaving their jobs willingly.
Right.
I walked into my job that was very comfortable. I made my own hours, hired my own people, had a great schedule, and I gave my 2-week notice. And my boss looked at me and said, well, just so you know, we're not going to fulfill your position for a while. So if it doesn't work out, you can come back.
That's a nice safety net to have.
So most people would have thought that, right? But you tell a type A driven Aries that, for me, that was basically telling me I wasn't going to succeed. So it was more ammunition to move forward and build this company, which little did I know I would end up in PR. It was always something I had thought of, but thanks to someone in my life at the time who'd given me the suggestion to build my own company, I decided to pursue it, and here we are.
What has surprised you the most? I mean, that's a tough question in 17 years, but as you think back about the last 17 years, what has surprised you, good, bad, or indifferently, over the past 17 years more than anything else? First thing that comes to mind.
First thing that comes to mind is that one of the compliments I get often is people will say, gosh, it's amazing. You not only did what you said you would do, but you did more. And that surprises me because when I started this business, to me, it was the standard that you delivered. You delivered on what you promised that you were going to do. And what I found out is that actually in the PR space, so many PR firms not only don't meet the standard, but they consistently underperform. And then I understood why the current stat of 80% of PR firms going out of business after 3 years. I know why that stat is, because they cannot perform. So that was surprising.
Awesome.
It still is surprising.
Well, congratulations for lasting 17 years. And obviously from the momentum you have, it's at least 17 more if that's what you choose to do. So
I hope so.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So a little bit about Paula, just from the bio, and I'm not a big fan of reading through on the air, but there's a few things that jumped out at me. As you mentioned, founded Sterling PR in 2008, right? As we were in this recession, I was selling executive education programs at USC at the time. And right prior to the recession, all I had to do was pick up the phone. It was when USC football was in its heyday. Pete Carroll was the coach. We were winning. Everything was great. Hi, it's Ed Hart with USC, and boom, I've got a meeting. I've got a face-to-face after that phone call. '08 hits, and no one wanted to meet with you anymore. No one had training budgets. No one had travel budgets. No one had PR budgets. Yet you to make it work. So you've been recognized in Entrepreneur Magazine. Your firm has done PR throughout Orange County, North Texas. I read. Tell me why North Texas from Orange County? What bridged you from here to North Texas?
Yeah, good question. So, I've been blessed. There's been so many opportunities throughout my career that have really opened up additional doors. And so I initially started expanding outside of Southern California because I was doing a lot of speaking engagements. I was a, featured keynote speaker for companies like Vizio, Oracle, MindBody across the country. So I would speak and I would pick up clients in states, quite frankly, that I've never been to. Because there were people coming in from all over to listen to me speak at these conferences. And in doing so, and in traveling several years ago, really in like 2013 and 14, I started realizing how much North Texas was growing. And I started doing some research on the market about what they were projecting infrastructure was going to be, some of the different developments that were happening, in particular in North Texas. And at the time, I had an assistant who worked for me here in California, but was from Texas. And she came to me one day with her big, beautiful brown eyes and said, I'm so sorry. I hate to leave you, but I really want to go back to Texas. I want to be with my family. So if you ever decide to come to Texas, of course, would love to be back on your team. So, of course, I was sad. And a month or two went by, and I said, I'm going to come and visit you.
Nice.
So I did. I came to visit her. But what I was really doing was doing some research in the city and checking out a few different spots and meeting with people at the Chamber of Commerce and trying to get an idea of the lay of the land. And by the end of the trip, I said, so good news. I've decided that we're going to expand here, which led me to actually living in Texas part-time for 3.5 years, traveling between here and there. And I was really passionate about helping business owners in the North Texas market who were looking to grow. But also, if you remember, here in California, Toyota at the time was sending many people from their headquarters to North Texas. So what I found is there were so many Californians I would run into that were moving from California to Texas, either associated with Toyota or starting their own companies, that to have me as a connection who knew the California way of doing things, understood the Texas market, was like a match made in heaven.
Sure. Talk about PR. I mean, it's interesting. And we have our CEO of First Bank, by the way, our podcast is presented by the First Bank Center for Family-Owned Businesses. I forgot to throw that in at the top. So here it is. Michael Williamson, who's our CEO, moved from Texas up to St. Louis, where we're headquartered. And right away, one of the first things we're doing at the bank is we're expanding into Texas, because he has relationships there. But even that being said, even as it was years ago, it's such a booming market, the opportunities throughout Texas to grow. So I appreciate your reasoning. We have a niece that lives in San Antonio now, and we're constantly looking at what can we do to do more business out there. It's just selfishly so we can see her. Talk about PR. I mean, what are some of the misunderstandings? So my first exposure in PR, I worked in minor league baseball and I had a PR director. She wrote my press releases. She did community events, made sure our mascot was out of the community, made sure I was out of the community. And that's obviously part of it. But what misunderstandings do people have when they think of PR that you try to overcome? And who needs PR? Second question.
Those are both great questions. I'll start with, sort of misconceptions. I think when it comes to our space, when somebody has not worked with a publicist or somebody that has not, has no experience with a PR team, a lot of times they think someone in my position or in my company's position, all we're doing is just sending pictures to the press, attending events, trying to be, connecting clients with the who's who. And that is 1% of a huge pie. So what is PR and who needs it? My answer to that is PR is the true north that guides all of your marketing best practices. Because without your messaging and your marketing positioning, your email marketing, your social media, your website, your events, none of that have a focus. So for me, when I explain to PR to clients, I say, really, it's creating your messaging and your brand positioning that will guide every facet of your marketing, all of your marketing vehicles. So for me, when I come in with a client, the situations are a little different, but typically when I meet with a client, I will start working on their brand strategy and positioning. Then I'll look at their marketing avenues that they've got lined up. Email marketing, social, events, press, you name it, advertising buys, start figuring out how that messaging and positioning makes sense with their marketing vehicles. But more importantly, how is it going to be impactful? So I say this a lot to clients. More information is not more for the media, meaning if you're just wanting us to spam them with a bunch of different information, that's not strategic. That's not intentional. I'm a big believer in strategy, moving with intention, being super purpose driven. And that's where we've seen results.
Yeah. What, you work with all different types of industries. What do you find? I mean, you talked about Oracle and Visio and Mindhub and some of these others. Are there organizations or industries that you tend to kind of gravitate towards more, or is it across the board?
Yeah, good question. We certainly have developed a niche in a couple different industries. We have a niche in the wealth management space because our marketing firm understands SEC compliance, which most marketing firms don't. And the problem in that space is if you don't understand SEC compliance, nothing that you do from email marketing to social to press will pass a compliance team, and therefore nothing can be used. So we have a niche in working with that because we've become really good at understanding rules and regulations. We also have a niche in the nonprofit space, and that's primarily driven because that's close to my heart. I'm super passionate about working in that space. We also do a lot with med spas, plastic surgeons, the fitness space, authors. I have a forensic accountant right now who's super interesting to work with. When I'm taking on a client, I'm not necessarily looking at their industry because I have worked with clients in a lot of different industries. I'm looking for a couple things. Integrity. Are they someone who can take direction? Because a lot of times I'll meet with clients and they just sort of want a yes man. They don't want somebody who's going to bring new ideas and help get them towards their goals. I've met with people who just liked the idea of having a publicist, but not actually working with the publicist. Those are two different things. You have to release control a little bit and of course that takes me earning trust. But I look for integrity. Like I said, I also look for really good communication. So things need to be fluid in my industry. Things can happen very quickly. So I need someone who's going to be responsive. We need to work with a team. And I also want to work with brands that I connect with. And I say that because unlike a lot of my competitors or other firms, yes, I do have a team behind me, but I'm an integral part of every single campaign. And I really want to enjoy who I'm working with because I view each of these brands as a part of my brand.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, I work with family businesses for a living and, all industries, virtually all industries, not literally, but certainly most industries. But, I have certain brands that I'm loyal to and in love with the companies that I represent and the companies I work with. But, there's some in the coffee industry, the wine industry, the hospitality industry that these are products I use, and they are, if I'm going to drink coffee, it's convenient coffee. And it's not a plug because they don't pay me to plug them, but it's the coffee I drink at home. It's the coffee my wife and I enjoy. And when I'm talking coffee with people, that's what I'm talking about. Doesn't mean I won't have Starbucks. I love Starbucks and have friends working there too. But for me, the brand is more than just the product and just the packaging. It's the people behind it. And I think that's what I hear you saying as well. You have to trust them. It can be a great product. It can be the greatest lip balm in the world, but if you don't know the people or don't trust the brand, why are you going to use it? So
I completely agree with you. It has a lot to do with the people and the purpose. I will say though, and I make this joke, but I'm actually serious. The only thing we don't do is food and beverage. And the reason is I'm Italian and I love to eat and drink. I love a good meal and I do not want that to be work. So I gladly refer those clients to my fellow peers who do a great job.
I love it. That's good. That makes a lot of sense. Actually, I worked in baseball, as I mentioned before, for a number of years. And for the longest time, I was in minor league baseball, but going to a major league baseball game wasn't that appealing to me because it was work. And even though I wasn't working there, I was looking at all the intricacies and nuances of what was happening in the stadium and judging it from a business perspective. As soon as I got out of the business, I started enjoying baseball again. So
there you go.
You talked about a lot of different industry or types of clients you represent. Three that jumped out at me, and I want to talk about those a little bit. Wealth management, number one, First Bank. We have a robust wealth management team, and that's one of the big strengths that we have at First Bank, not only our commercial banking and real estate, but our wealth side as well. And that's sort of a plug because that's who sponsors my podcast and it's my day job. Nonprofits, which I want to come back to in a second, and authors, as you and I talked about over coffee a while back.
Yes.
I've written a book, writing more books. And so let's start with authors and not looking for free advice by any stretch, but for everybody I know is either writing or thinking about writing a book. What goes into the publicity? And I know it's a big thing, but when you think about representing authors, what comes to mind? What do we need to remember?
Yeah, well, great question. And my best piece of advice for an author breaking into this space is it's so important that who you surround yourself with on your team. especially from a PR perspective, that they are helping you be the best version of you and they are not trying to package you into someone else. And I say that because I know a lot of publicists and PR firms who will bring on people like authors who are emerging, and they have kind of a box and a way that they like to do things for authors, and things start to look very cookie cutter. And to a degree, I can understand they're trying to make things systematic, but it takes away the heart and soul of the individual, of the entrepreneur, and of the author. So I really think, especially for an emerging author with a first book, that first book, first of all, once you publish it, you're not going to like it. Every first time author I've spoken to, they publish their book and within a week or two, they're like, oh my gosh, I
Look
would
at all the
change
changes
this.
I
I
should have
would have
done.
done this different.
Yeah.
Yes. But the next thing is you really, really need to respect the fact that this is your grand entrance. So you really need to be confident in what that is.
Nice. Well, I want to talk with you further off camera about that further.
Of course, of
I
course.
mentioned to you the book Boomer Wisdom that I've written and collaborated with, 58 other people. Sorry, something in my eye. Would love to chat with you further. I'm talking with the publisher now and with editors, and we're getting it really finalized, but getting it out the right way is certainly important to me and to those of us that are in the book. All right, let's get into the nonprofit conversation. Like myself, you serve on a variety of different nonprofit boards. I know you just joined my good friend Jessica at Casa Youth Shelter. She's a dear friend.
Did.
Sue Grant with the Literacy Project. I know Sue is a dear friend, probably client of yours as well, and a dear friend of mine.
Yes.
We could go on, but what is it about working in the nonprofit sector, both from a Sterling PR perspective, but more important to Paula working in nonprofits? Why is it so important to you?
Yeah, and those are two very different answers for sure. I think from a Sterling PR perspective, when I founded the company, what I always said to everyone on my team was it was important to me that who we worked with was really making a difference. I wanted to work with brands that had some sort of a smart and intentional give back plan in place, a planned giving strategy. I really wanted to make sure that we were making a difference. Making a difference to me is important. I don't do what I do just to own a company. I don't do what I do to fill time. I do what I do, and my team does what they do because we truly know, and we've seen over the years, the impact that we're helping others make and that we're making for our clients. I'd say for me, for Paula, when you've been in business a while, and you can relate, Ed, there comes a point in time when you realize that it's not about the business, that it's also part of you building a legacy.
Right.
And when I think about what I want that to be in 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, I really want people to say when they look back and go, wow, yes, she had a great body of work, but she really did make a difference in so many different industries. That to me is my driving force. I really, really want, if people say nothing else, I want people to have said that.
All right, let's drill down on that a little bit. When you think about making a difference, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it depends on project or the person. But for me, if I just kind of strip that all back, I think making a difference in anybody's life, we'll just talk about in people's lives, it's being able to be that one person that sometimes believes in you more than you believe in yourself to help you get to the next level. For me, I mean, I'm front row seat to a lot of really hard conversations with business owners and entrepreneurs, and sometimes they come to me and wow, they are defeated because of a merger or an acquisition or a business relationship that went wrong, and they just need me to say the one thing that's going to keep them going, that's going to remind them of who they are, who they're serving, that they're going to get through it. And I have a whole folder. It's called My Why. And my why is filled with cards and emails from people who will thank me after I've been a part of tough conversations, which tough conversations are not things you work into a contract, by the way. That's part of what I bring to the table as a person. For me, knowing I'm able to be that one person sometimes that can completely impact the trajectory of someone's life and decision-making process, that is a very, very special place that I hold for sure.
As a individual who's actively involved in the community as you are, running a company that's tremendously engaged in the community, and in my role as well, we get asked to participate everywhere. I sit
Of
on,
course.
I'm active in 3 boards. I touch a few others, but 3 where I'm actually on the board. I have my answer to this question, which I can share, but I'm more, and my audience knows it if they've listened to me already, but how do you decide where you decide to give your time, your talent, your treasure, your involvement on a board? I know that, at-risk youth is certainly one of those areas that's in your bio. And certainly when I look
Mhm.
at the nonprofits where you serve, and, like me, that's also an area that's near and dear to me. How do you say no? And how do you say yes? And why do you say yes?
Mm.
Saying no is a
Well,
lot harder than saying yes, that's for sure.
saying no is often much harder. For me, children's causes have always held a special place. And that's interesting coming from someone like myself who doesn't have kids and who didn't want to have kids. I've
Yeah,
been blessed to be a step parent and I loved that role. But I've always felt like children don't have a choice. And listen, none of us are getting out of here alive. There's going to be future generations.
yep,
And if we can make sure that these up and coming generations have a fair shot at building the best life they can, regardless of their circumstances. To me, that's important. So I also look at destinations like Sherman Library and Gardens, which I'm blessed to represent. They've been around 68 years, and I would love to make sure that that destination is around another 68 or another 100 and beyond. So working with them right now for the Grow the Gardens campaign is special to me because we're helping set that destination, a world-class cultural hub up for success for the next, generation of families that will come through and appreciate these local, hubs that they have.
yeah. How did you choose to get involved with Sue and the Literacy Project? Was it the Literacy
Mm.
Project first, or was it Sue first?
They come as a package deal.
Absolutely.
Sue is such a gift to all who know her,
Yeah.
which you can understand. So Sue came to me and she said, "Hey, listen, this is a project that's close to my heart, but I really need someone like you on the outside, helping me with the PR strategy." Even though Sue is a great publicist herself, she had OCPR for many years before she retired.
Yeah.
And our magic is that she really has 2 publicists, me and her, working together to bring the literacy project to more and more children that are underserved and underperforming school districts. So it's really been an honor to work with them as well.
Yeah, I love that. Can you talk a little bit about early role models or mentors in your life? Who helped shape you into the person you are? Is there one person, people that stand out as those mentors that you just looked at and thought, wow, maybe it's parents, maybe it's famous person, maybe it's a teacher, all of the above?
Yeah. Well, I have 3 great stories and I'll keep them short, but I would be remiss if I didn't name all 3.
Yeah.
The first one is my Italian grandmother
Hmm.
who, immigrated here when she was a little girl. She grew up, she passed when I was 12. But this woman taught me so much about life in the 12 years I had with her. A couple of her, words of wisdom that she would say is presentation is everything. I don't care if you've got $1 or $1,000, you can put yourself together. And her point was money doesn't have anything to do with it. It's about
Yeah.
putting yourself together, and that's showing a sign of respect to others.
Mhm.
She was big on working hard. She believed nothing should come free, to work hard and put in the work to achieve what you want. And she was big on education. Her favorite gift to give me every holiday was a book. Nancy Drew books were a favorite when I was a little girl. I
Nice.
wish I had them still. But she instilled my love of reading, which I've held close to heart. So, like, for example, the Literacy Project, working with them, it reminds me so much of my grandmother because that's where my
Yeah.
love of reading came from. Next would be a teacher, actually in college. Um, Short version of the story, we were turning in a final assignment. And I had this best friend who was super fun and energetic, but was really bad at doing homework. And so we all turned in our papers, and he did not turn in his because why would he? He normally didn't. And she was frustrated with him. So after I turned in my paper and some of my other college mates did, he walked up and let her know that he didn't have his paper to turn in. And she stood up and told the whole class to sit down. And she went on to say that life is not a dress rehearsal. That became the tagline for my company.
Mhm.
And what she essentially said in this long speech that she gave was, today isn't practice. We get one shot at today, and you need to show up every day being the best that you can to be prepared to pursue your dreams. No one's going to do it for you. So
That's
Uh,
good.
yeah, those two were huge. And the third person is someone that I actually worked for prior to starting my own firm. She was an incredible regional manager named Dana. And one thing that she said to me when we were trying to make a hiring decision is she said, always know who's replaceable and who is not.
Hmm.
And so we had a long conversation about it that I won't go into here, but that has guided me in a lot of my hiring practices throughout running my company. And it's given me a lot of wisdom that I share with my clients when they're trying to make tough hiring or firing decisions.
Interesting insight too, because I worked for a guy years ago who always talked about how, you know, if he wasn't the greatest leader I ever had, so I'm not going to name his name, but I worked for his company nearly 30 years ago. And he always said, you know, you're all replaceable. If I stick my hand, you know, my fist in a puddle of water and I pull my hand out, that water is instantly replaced. I can fill it with somebody else. And that was his way of looking at it. I used the same analogy and said, or you can put your hand in that puddle of water, pull it out, and look at the ripple because I was there. And
Right.
so there's really two ways of looking at it. Yeah, you can be replaced. We all can be replaced. If I retire, die, move on, move out of the area tomorrow, someone else will take my job and they'll do it maybe even better than I'm doing it. Hopefully my legacy and my impact will be felt even if I'm not there. And it sounds like that's a lot of the wisdom that you received as well.
True.
Yeah, we're all replaceable, but our impact isn't. So that's
No, it's absolutely not.
yeah. Who inspires you today when you think about those that inspire you and kind of your North Star, to use your term? Who do you look at and why?
You know, it's so interesting. A lot of my inspiration comes from my clients these days.
Me too.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I look at so many of them in different industries and different, growth cycles, different phases of their career, and I marvel at how they move through things with foresight and ingenuity, their perseverance, their grit. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, sometimes I look around and I actually feel so incredibly lucky that I am working with these people where it's not even a job. I just feel so blessed to be with some of the brightest minds in the room.
Feel the same way. I look at the people that, and you and I have a lot of mutual friends I've looked through, not just on LinkedIn, but people I've talked to about you who know you, and these rock stars that you and I both know who are just making such a big impact on us. And I could sit here and start naming off names, and I won't because I'll leave somebody out. But yeah, I learn. I sit and I talk with these. I had a call today with one of my favorite family business people, and she and I we're on a board together, and we both have a similar passion for exercise and a similar passion for work and families and writing and everything else. And it's like, she's 12, 13, 14 years younger than I am, but I look at her as a mentor because she's
Mhm.
in the family business and she's just a great leader. What are some of the biggest challenges when you think back in your career early on before you started the company, maybe during the 17 years you've been running the firm, whatever? What are some of the biggest challenges you face and how did you overcome them? And if you want to give any shout out to anybody that might have been there to guide you through, you can do that.
Sure. Well, one of the biggest changes in my industry, and it was really happening right when I started my company, was social media. That was really emerging in 2007, 2008, and it's a huge part of our lives today here in 2024. But as an agency, it was changing the shape of so many PR and marketing firms, and me starting one I didn't necessarily have to change my agency because I was creating the agency with this in mind. But it was a learning curve in my industry. There's been a lot of things that have come and gone, a lot of things that continue to change. Social media is a lot to keep up with.
Mhm.
It's also something that I remind my clients they shouldn't put all of their eggs in one basket too.
Yeah.
Because just like email marketing and just like direct mail and just like press and ad buys, you really need diversification. It is split up based on your marketing goals. When I think about growing the company, what has been interesting for me is anybody who's worked with me since the beginning knows the first 7 or 8 years of my company, I was really uncomfortable kind of being front and center as the
Hmm.
face of the company. I didn't start the company to be the face of it. That I actually started in this space because I like to be behind the scenes. Most
Interesting.
real good PR people do. And I had a mentor at the time who pulled me aside and said, "Hey, listen, you're this point in your career where you either need to bring in someone who is comfortable to be the face to help you grow as you move into other states, etc.,
Yeah,
or you're going to have to get comfortable being more front and center.
yeah,
And that was a challenge for me because even though I am extroverted, I'm more of like an introverted extrovert. I also like my time alone. So
yeah.
I had to learn how to be comfortable in that setting and in different spaces. I think I've achieved a good balance. So that's where
Yeah.
I'm at with that today.
Yeah, no, that's good, and that's true. I'm not an extroverted introvert. I'm an extrovert to the nth degree. I mean, but I think COVID and the adjustments that we all had to make and the adaptability that we all had to implement into our lives from 2020 until today has made me more comfortable with my alone time. I never would have sought out as much alone time as I seek out now. I love it. I love working from home with my door closed. I mean, I love being around my family and friends and going out in the community. But boy, when I look at my calendar on a Sunday night, I see that Thursday I've got an office day all day. I'm like, yes, I get a day where I don't have to be on stage. And I love being on
Right.
stage. I'm a ham. That's why I have a
Yeah.
podcast. I love talking to people. You're my 105th episode.
Wow.
I love what I learn when I have these conversations.
Mhm.
I look at the advanced degree that I've received in people just by doing this podcast.
Right.
105 now conversations with dynamic people like yourself who have varying backgrounds and experiences that I've been able to learn from and hopefully bring to our audience is pretty cool to, be able to take your story and share it with the masses now. And I don't have to go out and be in public. I can sit right here in the privacy of my little bedroom of my house and enjoy the little bit of introvert time that I get.
Isn't that interesting? We all have such different takeaways from the pandemic, and it's
Right?
so unique looking back. None of us would have thought, like, wow, it would have changed our life in this way or that way. I'm always interested in people like yourself, what you've taken out of it. So thank you for sharing that. I wouldn't have known that about you.
What's interesting, I've asked the question of a lot of people too on this episode, on this podcast, but also just in general conversation. Let's just go back in time. It's March 15th, 2020, and sitting in front of you is a switch. And you get to see the future. You get to see into October of 2024, where we sit today. It's October 10th when we're recording this. And everything that transpired in the world, in our country, in our state, in the community, in your business, in your family, in your life, all of it would happen if you flip that switch. Or if you don't flip the switch, none of it would happen. What would you do?
That's a really dynamic question. Here's where I'm at with that. I don't think anything happens by mistake. I think life is by design, and I think there were a lot of lessons that many of us learned during that period of time that we probably wouldn't have learned without it. Now, certainly there were some horrible things that happened during that time frame that I don't wish would have happened and I wouldn't want to relive again.
Exactly.
But quite frankly, I think I'm a better person today because I lived through that, so I would have chosen to do it again.
That's how I feel too. And I hear some people say, oh, there's no way, all the death and all the destruction. Yeah, and I agree, totally agree.
Yep.
I'm sitting in a home right now that I wouldn't be in if COVID didn't happen because I had an opportunity to work doing PPP loans on the side to make extra money. And with that money, we bought a house and we were able to donate to a lot of different foundations over the last few years that we wouldn't have been able to do. I have people who passed away from COVID. I have people who died of other family members who died during COVID, unrelated, but COVID sort of related. And, and I see the horrible things that have happened. But to your point, nothing happens by accident. And I think it's on all of us to learn from the experiences around us. We don't know what tomorrow looks like. All I know is that whatever happens tomorrow, it's up to me to learn from it.
It is our experiences and our challenges in life, my belief is they don't define us. It's how we choose to use them. It is a choice.
Totally.
So every person is different. And, I think I've spoken to several people close to me, during that time frame about this similar conversation. And an interesting takeaway several people had is the idea of mental toughness.
Yeah.
They said, I was really, really challenged during this period of time, and I learned how to be mentally tough. And certainly there's a flip side. We have a huge problem with mental illness right now.
Yeah,
that has
more
really more than ever that has been, spurred by the pandemic and what people went through. So there's two sides of
Yeah.
that coin as well.
Yeah, I've had kids and grandkids, especially grandkids, that only knew what it was like to be studying on a laptop in their bedroom at home and didn't
Yeah,
have
I
phones,
can't
and
even
didn't have
imagine.
Little League. And yeah, I look at my high school, and high school for me was like this 4-year frat party. I mean, I wasn't a bad person, but I wasn't a real, I was doing some
Hmm.
foolish things as a high school kid. Enjoyed it, played baseball and football and had great friends and things of that nature. But boy, if I would have had to be confined to being homeschooled or living at home and getting all my education through a computer, I would be a tremendously different person today than I am today, for sure.
Oh, and even the impact that it had on children's education, like we speak to through the Literacy Project, the
Yeah,
significant disadvantage that children are at just who are learning to read is astounding.
yeah,
California, for those of our listeners who don't know, California is the most illiterate state. We
right.
already were at the very bottom, and it is so much worse now because of the learning challenges during the pandemic. So wouldn't have wanted that to happen again, but I look at
Yeah,
that now as an opportunity of what can we do to address it? What can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again?
yeah. One of the things you sent to me in the preparation for this, and I love this, of the previous guests that I've had, I don't know the numbers, but not all send me talking points. Oftentimes I'll send some questions to my guests to trigger some conversation and get you thinking a little
Right.
bit. You sent me some talking points that just brought emotion to me, especially
Oh,
the first one that I'm going to ask you about. As everybody knows who watches or listens, my last name is Hart. The name of the podcast is From the Heart. I have a blog that I've tried to maintain over the years, also called From the Heart, and that's because of my last name, but it's also because of how I try to live my life. I try to
yeah.
live with heart, and that's a phrase you put in that email of, so I'm just going to ask you in your words to talk about what does it mean to live with heart?
So backing up about 12 years ago, the first piece of artwork that I ever acquired is a piece that's called Living with Heart.
Hmm.
I bought it at a Miracles for Kids auction. And I'll never forget sitting there. It was the first time I'd been to any of these, higher up scale fundraisers. And I was watching this piece be auctioned off. And I wasn't moved until the person who painted it came on stage and started talking. And when she shared what living with heart meant to her, I was hooked. So, needless to say, I purchased the piece. It's the first piece of artwork that I've acquired. It hangs in my house. And every time I look at that, it reminds me that no matter what is happening, no matter how mad my day is, no matter how crazy my day is, to live true to my authentic self and to lead with love. We live in a world that is very divisive most of the time. It's
Yeah,
easier to take a rough edge. Leading with love and leading with heart is actually harder most of the time, but it actually will make the biggest difference. I also think, too, it reminds me every time I walk by it, we're in this age where artificial intelligence is emerging. And
yeah,
quite frankly, in our lifetimes, it's probably going to try to take over.
yeah,
And what that piece reminds me is even though technology may and probably will continue to take over more of our life, nothing will ever be able to replace the human element. Because in any situation, and you and I both know this, you can have a banker, a PR person, an email marketing director. You can have people with the same title and experience in a room. The difference in how they operate is going to be based on their core values and are they leading with heart.
I agree.
So, yes, artificial intelligence serves a purpose, but it's actually going to drive up the demand for more of the human element because people will soon realize, if they haven't yet, that when it push comes to shove, things are hard. You really need a game changer and a difference maker. You need the human in the room.
Yeah, I love that, leading with love, leading with heart. That resonates for me so much for obvious reasons, but also just I always say that my favorite people that I get to work with, going back to our conversation earlier in this chat, that we have people that we like to have clients that we connect with, and that their lives and the way they live resonates with us. And my favorite people are people who are authentic. What you see is what you get. And there is no authenticity when it comes to AI and things of that nature.
No.
It's a tool. Heck, when I'm done with this podcast with you, the first thing I'm doing, as I mentioned, is plugging it in to my AI program that I use only to pull out the highlights, but not to replace any of your words or my words or the content or the heart behind this, but just to help me edit it. But yeah, that authenticity that comes with, when you do lead from your heart, you can't help, there's nothing else you can do but be authentic, because that's who you really are.
True. And you've probably been in situations where maybe it's a difficult business meeting or a difficult business negotiation, and maybe somebody just wants you in the room.
Yeah.
Not because you're giving any special part of the presentation. They want you in the room. They want your energy. They want you there for maybe an insight here or there. But just that little bit of energy and possible insight can make all the difference.
Yeah.
Technology cannot fulfill that role. So I think as humans, we're going to have to learn how to utilize AI to be better versions of ourselves, not to replace us.
Yeah, it's funny. I've done a lot of conflict resolution with clients over the last 30 years, especially the last 15 or so in the family business space, where you've got conflict in the family. You take your conflict at work and your conflict in family and put it together. But when the conflict isn't going anywhere and it looks like people are just like at an impasse, oftentimes I'll pull back and I'll say, look, let's spend the next 5 to 10 minutes or 20 minutes or half hour or the rest of the day speaking from our heart rather than our head, and trying to psychoanalyze and overanalyze and talk about the hurt from when we were kids. What's your heart telling you right now? And more often than not, what will happen is, let's say you and I are brother and sister and the company isn't going forward because we're at a disagreement that we just can't get through. When I try to approach a situation from, well, what's Paula really thinking here? What is her heart saying? What does Paula really want? And you're approaching it from what does Ed want? It's a pretty good way of getting through that conflict and getting through that issue, because we realize most people want what's best for the company and best for the other person and best for the family business. So it's interesting how, gosh, that living and leading with heart, that might be the title of this podcast, by the way, which
I love it. Please.
Yeah.
It would thrill me.
I wrote down leading with love. So don't be surprised if that shows up at the title.
I like it.
You talk about how you love a good story, and part of what you do in your world and your work is helping people craft and share their story. Why is the power of storytelling so important to you?
I don't really think you can know a person or a brand until you know their layers. And we're in a world that can be very superficial, very quick fix. A lot of times people don't want to invest the time to get to know people or a brand's layers. And so as a brand strategist and a publicist, I have to figure out how to distill layers into pieces that can be quickly and easily digestible. So for the world we live in, the story can be told. But I also think too, a story to me consists of beads on a necklace of time. And the story is not the same without each bead in place. And I also know there's so many brands and entrepreneurs who, without the right guidance, their stories will never be told. And that's important because I have a great example. I work with a wealth management firm in San Diego, and their founder, who's been in the business 43 years, is going to be retiring in the next couple of months. And this is a man who has spent 43 years building a legacy, giving back to so many charities, such a pillar of the community, leading so many boards. And I look at him and I think, gosh, if we hadn't done any of our work over the last 5 years I've been involved with them, none of this story would have been told before he retired. Yeah. And it would have been lost after that point. And so I love the fact, even though I am sad, it is very bittersweet for me that he's retiring. I love the sense of peace I have knowing that I was able to help share so much of his story as he closed in on the end of an era. Yeah,
I love that. That's so great. That's a big part of what I do. I have for those watching, over my shoulder up here on the bookcase behind me, I'm not going to tell this story because of personal pride. I'm going to tell it because of pride for the company that it represents. And I'll name them by name. Mayumi Allison, who runs Hosa Technology in Buena Park, is a longtime family business. Her dad was retiring, and before he got too old, he's still with us, but before he got to the point where maybe he couldn't recall all the stories of how his business started, she wanted to capture the story. And so she asked me if I knew anybody that does video. long story short, in 2020 during COVID, I found a company through a mutual friend, and they went out and they captured Hosa's and the founder's story on video. It's 22-minute long video. They're in the music industry. They make cables that guitar players
Wow.
will plug from their guitar into their amp, among other things, but that's kind of what they're known for. Musicians I know all use Hosa's cables. And the story took on a life of its own. 22-minute video became a talk about this. It's a trophy that they won for this at the advertising awards, the Addies. And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a
Okay.
national advertising award, and it wasn't meant to be an ad, but it was picked up, and it's really just, millions of people have now seen the video, and it's for me, it's not about the trophy and about any of my role or anybody else's role. It's the fact that their story is so powerful. Millions of people have watched it because of the power of the story. And I love a great story too. I think I invited you, and I think you're not able to come, but I'm part of a group, Orange County Storytellers, and we've been doing these programs for a couple of years and helping people craft and develop their story, not from a professional standpoint. I love a great story, but I'm not one that's going to help people develop it, but I know people who do. But yeah, I too, like you, the power of the story is so, I hate to use the word power again, but it's impactful. And
Someone's story can completely change your decision on whether or not to work with them, whether or not
100%.
to be in a relationship with them.
Yeah,
Someone's story can totally shift how you look at them. And so many people just don't want to get to know the story, but the story is where the magic happened.
100% agree. And the story, that power of the story too is, I mean, we watch movies, we read books, we watch TV shows, and there's
Yeah.
always it starts here, and then there's the conflict that crashes the story, and then there's the hero or the great moment where the couple kisses and they embrace and the story comes back, and then there's that misunderstanding or what have you. But we all have those in our own lives too. We all have those, those times down in the valley or in the cave, or that time where something happened and I looked inward, or I heard somebody else's story. This gentleman you're alluding to, the fact that you've helped him capture his story is great for him and his family and his relatives and kids and grandkids and everybody else. But someone else is going to go through something at some point and look at that story and go, wow, look what he did. He made it through,
Yeah.
why can't I? So there's a lot of power.
Absolutely. It was truly been an honor. I will be extremely emotional on his last day, I am sure.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to it, but I am happy for him.
Where do you find inspiration? I know
I
that's a
find
huge, big question, but I'll just ask it as it is.
it's an easy answer for me because I am inspired by the things that set my soul on fire. So music and art. You can find me at concerts, you can find me in museums, you can find me in art galleries. I'm a horrible artist. I can barely draw a stick figure and don't even try to have me play an instrument, but I get my most inspiration from those two things.
That's funny. I'm the same way. I come from a musical family, and my wife's very artistic, and people around me are as well. But I'm colorblind, so art and me don't match. When I was 12, I was given the option by my parents to take lessons of any kind, and I had brothers and sisters and my dad actually played the banjo, who all played musical instruments. Two brothers who have been or are professional musicians. I can sing, but I can't play an instrument. I chose to go baseball and golf when
Right.
it's like, why don't you play the piano or the guitar? Because I took baseball lessons and golf lessons. But yeah, I'm inspired by that as well. Do you have a favorite genre of music or band or somebody that's like, you get to take this one band CD with you on the deserted island, so to speak?
That is so hard because I have such eclectic tastes, but I will tell you my all-time absolute favorite that just will always go down is just someone who touches my heart and strikes emotion every time I hear them sing is Andrea Bocelli. I have cried at every single concert. But you pair that with I love EDM music. I also love country music. I love old school rock. So I'm all over the board. But the one person who can really touch my heart when he sings is Andrea. I think Celine Dion was quoted as saying, like, when Andrea Bocelli sings, it's sort of like God singing.
I
He
agree.
just has this power that is unlike anything else.
Definitely. I don't have any of his music. I've never seen him in concert, but it's one of those where when he's on TV or I hear him, I stop and I watch and I listen.
He's a remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some talent there that, just I think you and I both have that ability, and I think a lot of us do, to recognize greatness when we see it or hear it. Must be
Yes.
the fact that we're both in Aries or something.
True. Yeah,
I don't know
I
what that
agree.
means, but I know that we both are. We talked about it before and you mentioned it here. So, all right, a couple more questions as we get close to our hour here. One of the things that I did when I ran the Center for Family Business at Cal State Fullerton for a lot of years is I took it upon myself, not because it was part of my job, but more of a passion, to define the word success and to identify, I worked with family and still do work with family businesses. I work with nonprofits. I work with, privately held companies, individuals and so forth. And to me, there's no real one definition of success, but I tried to come up with what was once I identified my definition of success, what was the common denominator in people that fit that description? So two-part question, which I do a lot of, and I shouldn't. I've been coached not to, but do it anyway. What would you say is your recipe for success? And then when you look at other people who you deem successful, sort of answers it in the first part of the question, what would be that common denominator that you see?
Well, and I'll answer that in a couple parts too. So,
Right.
when I approach a client, right, when I'm looking at a client's account, for me, if I combine authenticity, consistency, and perseverance with integrity and strategy, that creates a winning outcome. But when I feel successful as an entrepreneur, when I feel successful as a person, it's when I know that I've made a difference. It's when I get an email or a text from a client or we're having a conversation. They said, hey, listen, I was in a tough spot today. You really showed up. You went above and beyond. We didn't even have to ask you. You have no idea what that meant to me. You're not hired to do that, but you stepped in. Couldn't have done it without you. To me, these are these little wins in private. A lot of times the wins are in private. I don't need public recognition to feel successful. My wins come from things like that if I didn't share with anybody, nobody would even know.
I love that. I love that. It goes back to earlier on in the conversation when we talked about making a difference, making an impact, having that opportunity to be impactful in the work that you do. And it goes back to what you also talked about. If you don't want to be the face of the organization necessarily, you like being behind the scenes.
Well, and I think too, when you ask about when I look at other people and how do I deem them successful or not, right? I think someone has been successful in life when they're loving the life that they're leading. Life happens by design, and I meet my fair share of people who think differently. And of course, they're welcome to think differently, but we have a lot of power with our thoughts and our choices and intention. And on occasion, you'll meet somebody who's been really intentional with their choices and how they've showed up in decisions they've made, and they're happy. It doesn't matter how challenging life may be. Success doesn't necessarily mean you're free of challenges. Challenges come whether you're successful or not, but to be successful in life, to wake up every day and feel blessed and grateful, that's success to me.
It's interesting because you can't always tell success by looking at someone from the outside. I could walk out I'm thinking of two individuals I worked with right out of college. So this was 40 plus years ago. And my definition of success, at age 20 or 21 was very different than my definition today. Back then I'm walking and I had this experience. I walked out to the parking lot and I knew the CEO of the company, large, 3,000 or 4,000 employee, billion-dollar company. And I knew the CEO because I worked in HR, so I knew everybody in the company. And then a guy who worked in my department, both walked out. They both got into their cars. The guy in my department got into an old beat-up station wagon. CEO got into, today's equivalent of the Model S Tesla that didn't exist then, but whatever the nice car of the day was in the 80s, would have been really easy for me to right away go, oh, he's a success and he's not. But if you drill down more, he was divorced. He'd been through a lot of, addiction. He'd seen it in his family, a lot of things that had gone wrong or were going wrong in his life that you wouldn't see from his 8-to-5 job in the car he drives home he's in. The other guy in the beat up station wagon was going home to his wife and 6 kids. He was heading off to a piano recital, dinner with the entire family around the table. You tell me which one of them is more successful. You look at their jobs and their clothes and their car, and it's easy to make that assumption. But when you dive deeper into the person, and that's
to your point, it's the layers we talked about. When you get to know somebody's layers, that's when you know the full story. This is a great example of just knowing the surface. It didn't even tell you 1% of what you needed to know.
You got to dive deep, and that's a big part of what you do for a living. And I admire that. I love that
Oh,
I love that
thanks.
you're so good at telling your story, but that you're, because you can tell your story so well, it should give anybody watching and listening today even more confidence in talking to you
Oh,
about
thank
sharing your
you.
story. So with that in mind, how do people reach you if they'd like to learn more about working with you?
Sure. So connect with me on LinkedIn. It's a great place. Paula Steurer. Last name is Steurer. On Instagram, I'm at Sterling PR, or my website is a great place, sterlingpublicrelations.com.
I'll put all of that in the notes for this podcast as well, both on the YouTube version, which will be the video going out, as well as all the audio platform as well. What are some really last minute here? We're right up against it. I got my last question, which I always ask, as I'll get to before. What are some of the big, so it's October 10th, 2024. Your company's 17 years old. What are some of those big goals you have for down the road?
Years ago, like I mentioned, I did a lot of public speaking, and the pandemic, of course, took a lot of that away, during 20 to 2022, really. So I'm excited to get back on stage, do more public speaking.
Yeah.
Not told anybody this, but I'll drop it here. Something special for you. So I'm actually working on writing a book.
Nice.
It's not going to be out anytime soon. I'm excited for it. I'm working with a ghostwriter right now. So
Awesome.
we'll see where that takes me. It's going to help me tell a part of my story that I've yet to talk about. So
Nice.
that's on the horizon. And I think too, for our company, one thing that we're going to stay focused on is things like artificial intelligence continue to come into the space. We're not going to be replacing jobs with tech. We're going to be using tech to make people better on our team. And we're going to stay true to who we are as a company because it served our clients well. So, certainly we've got big goals to grow, but we're going to stay real true to our core values.
I like that. And I've done a lot of AI related podcasts and webinars over the last year, especially. And ultimately and I use that as well. AI for me isn't replacing jobs. It's helping us do our jobs better and more effectively.
Yes.
I would spend the rest of the day editing this podcast with AI. It'll be done in 15 minutes.
There you go.
So, all right. So I appreciate our time. I do have one final question. This
Sure.
one I ask all the time, and it's somewhat redundant because you just spent the last hour answering it, but I'm gonna package it in one question. Take it anywhere you want to go. And then when you're done, I'm going to just end the conversation on recording. We can keep going, but the recording will stop.
Sure.
Paula Steurer, what's in your heart?
Perseverance, grit. I'd really love to see the people I work with make a huge impact in the lives that they're seeking to serve. It's heavy on my heart, all the things that are going on in the world right now. We just went through these crazy hurricanes on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And obviously we have an election coming up. So I just hope that as a country, we can continue to be more united, less divided, and I can do my part as one human to help drive that. And that's where I'm at.